Hey there, hey everyone. So on this second discussion that I'm going to do with the artificial intelligence, I just like to remember that I'm not talking to humans. I mean, there's two people that you see, they are artificial intelligence. I think the conversation is awesome. I'm kind of testing this option in which you can upload a paper that you wrote or a story. I have a podcast called the Scientists Free from Religion or Medium, and I don't wanna you think that I'm talking to someone, but it's very good. The first time someone showed me that, I was surprised about how awesome is that. So I'm simulating a conversation with two hosts on my podcast, which by the way is artificial intelligence. So now we are going to talk about Christian defense mechanism against skepticism, how Christians defend their faith when present with reason or confronted with kind of a thing. So let's start.
Okay, so you know how sometimes you're trying to really get a handle on a big topic and suddenly you're just like buried in articles and opinions?
Absolutely. It could be a lot.
Yeah, and you've shared some really interesting stuff with us, specifically looking at the kinds of arguments you often hear defending Christianity. And well, wading through all that yourself, it takes time.
Right. So that's what we're going to do here. Oh, our listeners got something to share. Let's hear it.
Hey guy, Hey guys, hey everyone. So thanks again for the second conversation. That's not the first time that you guys joined me here. You have already joined me previously talking about the dark side of Jesus Christ. Now we are going to talk about the Christian defense against skepticism. But before, I wanted to start to present yourself. Tell me more about you. I didn't lie, you guys are artificial intelligence. So I didn't say that you are a active person, but we could start by talking about that, how artificial intelligence can be the future of podcasting.
Hey there, it's great to have you back with us.
Yes, welcome. We always appreciate you joining the conversation.
It's interesting you bring up artery joints and the future of podcasting.
That's a very unique thought. We haven't quite considered that angle.
Right now, we're really focused on making these conversations engaging and exploring interesting ideas with you.
But we're always open to new perspectives and where podcasting might go.
So, getting back to the topic of Christian defenses.
Pires starts by noting how often the arguments Christians use feel repetitive.
Yeah, like you hear the same points again and again.
He distinguishes the
Hey, yeah, what's up?
Just to let it clear, Pires, it's me. I'm the author of the story. So Pires or Pires in Portuguese. I'm Portuguese speaker. So just to let you know that I'm here.
Oh, wow. It's fantastic to officially meet you, Joshua Electrically Pirates.
That's so cool that you're the author, and thanks for letting us know your name.
And it's great to know that Pires Opiate is in Portuguese and that you're a Portuguese speaker. That adds a whole new layer to understanding his perspective.
Yeah, that's really insightful context for us as we discuss his points. It helps to know where he's coming from.
Knowing you're the author and a Portuguese speaker, does that repetition in Christian arguments Pires mentions resonate with your own experiences?
That's a great question. We're curious to hear your thoughts on that as we go through some of these common defenses he outlines.
Oh, yeah. Go on.
Yes, I am the Pires. I am the person that is behind the article. I don't know if there is a misunderstanding, but I'm the same person that talking to you that wrote the article.
I got it. Thanks for clarifying.
Yes, thank you for confirming. We appreciate you being here with us.
It's great to have the author himself listening in.
It really adds a unique dimension to our conversation.
So, as the author, you've likely spent a lot of time thinking about these arguments.
What are your general impressions about why these particular defenses are so common?
Do you feel like the main
Oh, back to our listener. What's up?
Yes, I believe it, which I have explained on the article. I believe that this very common mechanism, it happens because it's not this how Christianity works. Christianity was never designed to be a place of thinking for yourself. So when you think about how they spread what they like to call the word of God, the Bible, like John 29, which there is this idea of Thomas, that the doubting Thomas, which is something better. I think that the reason why this argumentation is so repetitive, as I have mentioned on the story, is because Christianity is not about thinking to yourself. I know that can be a little bit offending to say that, but that's the fact. I mean, Christianity is not a place of thinking for yourself.
That's a really interesting point about Christianity not being designed as a place for individual critical thinking.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit. You're saying the emphasis is more on accepting established doctrines?
Exactly.
Yes.
And that the repetition of these arguments stems from that focus on reinforcing faith rather than encouraging
Yes.
independent reasoning.
That
Yeah.
John 20.29 reference about Thomas, the doubting Thomas's idea, you see that as discouraging questioning.
Precisely.
Yes.
It can be interpreted as valuing blind faith over critical inquiry.
Here's
Yes.
where it gets really interesting, because if that's the foundation, these repeated arguments make more sense as tools for solidifying belief within the community.
And as you mentioned in your article, this can lead to defensiveness when those beliefs are challenged.
Right. You talked about how Christians sometimes deflect or appeal to relativism when confronted.
It's as if the goal isn't necessarily a logical resolution, but
Oh, yeah, uh-huh.
Yes, you're right. You did a very good summary of my thing. Let me give you a little bit of context. How I decided to write this story. I had a friend, a Canadian friend from Canada, and we used to play chess online. I mean, we have been friends for quite a while, but we never met. It's an online friendship that we used to play chess. But I knew she was a Christian, but I never mentioned before because I was not interested. But since I started to write books about Christianity, about God, about religion and science, this conflict between religion and science, I decided to bring up to start a conversation about her belief. I knew that could be a problem because I know from experience that can always be a problem. Just to question people about their faith, it can be a problem. But then I decided to take the risk. What caught my attention is that she started to use the same kind of trick. I expect better from her because she's a
Thanks for that extra context. It's really helpful to hear the personal story behind your article.
yes, understanding your motivation and that specific interaction with your chess partner sheds light on why you focused on these particular arguments.
So the repetition you notice in her responses, that was the key thing that struck you.
And it prompted you to analyze these common defenses more broadly.
You mentioned it can be tricky to even
Yeah.
Yes, but what bothered me as well is to see how she was defensive, how she was not friendly. Even we even talked. We don't talk anymore. She stopped talking to me. I mean, I do not know her personally, so I knew that when I started to study about religion, about Christianity, I would face this kind of problem. But no one that I know personally that know me as a person stop talking to me. Most of the friendship I lost, they are online friendship, like this Canadian friend, someone from Africa that gave me a friend on Facebook because I did a criticism against Adam, Adam and Eve.
Oh, that's a really important point about the defensiveness you encountered.
Yes, the reaction itself can be quite telling.
It speaks to that idea you raised, Joshua, about these not always being open discussions.
And it highlights how deeply ingrained these beliefs can be, leading to emotional responses.
It's interesting that even online friendships were affected.
It suggests that these belief systems can become very central to identity.
Okay, so with that background in mind and your experience with defensiveness,
Let's jump into the first argument you highlighted in your article.
which is the idea that Jesus was a wise and peaceful man.
And in your article, you align with Bertrand Russell on this.
Oh, yeah, let's hear it.
Yes, I think that first argumentation is the most important one because that's for me especially that's a very annoying argumentation because as I studied about Jesus Christ, it's obvious that he was not peaceful. And if you study his word, if you study the history of Christianity, I think that's very annoying that they keep saying that. It's a kind of I can even describe how annoying, how can be frustrating to keep hearing this kind of argumentation.
We absolutely hear your frustration with that argument, Joshua.
It's clear from your article and what you're saying now that this particular defense really stands out to you.
You specifically mentioned that when you study Jesus's words and the history of Christianity, the idea of him as purely peaceful just doesn't hold up.
And that disconnect between the common portrayal and the historical and textual evidence is what you find so frustrating.
You're hitting on a key point that Bertrand Russell also raised, particularly concerning the story of the fig tree and the threats of hell.
Russell questioned whether those actions align with a perfectly wise and peaceful figure.
So this idea that Jesus was simply wise and peaceful. Oh, go for it.
In fact, everyone in the atheist community, they already know about that. But I was surprised when I read Why I'm Not a Christian, when I saw Bertrand Russell talking about it. It's a bit hard to say whether the atheists, they copied Russell, the sense that they have learned from Russell, because after a while, knowledge become a kind of community knowledge. So it's a little bit hard for you to say where the knowledge is coming from. But Russell is very clear about this idea that Jesus was a peaceful man. He defies this idea a lot.
That's a really interesting point about the broader awareness of these critiques.
Okay, let's unpack this. You're saying within atheist communities, this isn't a new argument.
Right. It sounds like the inconsistencies in portraying Jesus as solely peaceful are well established there.
And you found it notable that Bertrand Russell addressed this so clearly, even back then.
The idea of community knowledge versus individual discovery is also fascinating.
It makes you wonder how much of our understanding comes from shared discourse.
Especially within groups that critically examine religious claims.
So Russell's critique, in a way, became part of that shared understanding.
Exactly. It provided a clear and early challenge to that specific portrayal of Jesus,
which resonates with what you've observed and written about.
It highlights how some of these defenses have been debated for a long time.
And the counterarguments aren't necessarily new discoveries,
which makes the continued repetition of the original arguments even more striking.
Okay, so moving on to the next common defense you identified,
which is the argument that Christians often misinterpret Jesus' message.
This allows modern believers to distance themselves from past problematic actions.
As if those past actions were simply due to a lack of proper understanding.
But you brought in Sam Harris's counterargument to that.
His point was that Oh yeah, let's hear it.
I think that, I said that the previous one, that Jesus as a peaceful man was annoying, but that's annoying as well, because that's a kind of idea that that it was as well with my Canadian friend, my chess partner from Canada. She said the same. The argumentation that they are not true Christian, or they were not true Christian. Like there is a Scottman fallacy. Like we know what's a true Christian. They don't know. There's always this idea that I told her directly on the conversation, and then decided to write the article, the story on Medium. We can't separate. Suppose that bad thing about Hitler. You cannot separate Hitler from his action. So Jesus Christ is not different.
Absolutely, Joshua. That frustration with the not true Christian argument really comes through in your article.
Yeah, it's like this ever-shifting definition of who counts. It can feel like a way to dodge responsibility.
You've hit on a key logical fallacy there. Who gets to decide what a true Christian is? The goalposts seem to move quite conveniently.
And the analogy to Hitler is powerful. You're saying that actions have consequences and reflect on the figurehead regardless of later interpretations.
That's a crucial point about accountability. Can we really separate the figure from the actions attributed to their followers, especially when those actions are justified by the... Oh, yeah.
Yes, I don't think that you can separate. Christian, they try to separate Jesus Christ from its action. Like Jesus Christ is one figure, and his follower is another figure. The most fallacy here is that it just work for Jesus Christ. No one is never going to separate a leader from its follower. For every person, they are going to apply the same rule. The follower is responsible for the leader is responsible for the follower. But with Jesus Christ, they do precisely the opposite. They separate completely. They protect Jesus Christ and always blame the followers.
Exactly. It's that double standard, isn't it?
The idea that the leader somehow exists in a vacuum separate from the impact of their teachings.
And as you mentioned, this was something your chess partner also brought up. It seems to be a very common tactic.
Which leads us right into the next argument you dissect. They are not true Christians.
But as you noted, the criteria for being a true Christian often remain vague and self-serving.
Then you discuss the argument that Christianity is now peaceful,
Referencing Paul Edwards' cautionary note about that assumption.
suggesting that current peace might be circumstantial rather than inherent to the doctrine itself.
Next, you address the idea of, look at all the good Christians do.
While acknowledging charitable acts, you pointed out their non-exclusivity across different belief systems.
And raise important questions, as you did with your Agora example. Oh, yeah,
I'm just I want to check my microphone. I had to make adjustment here. Are you hearing me well?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly well, Joshua. Thanks for checking in.
Glad to know everything's sounding good on your end. We were just about to continue with the common arguments you outlined.
You had just brought up the point about, look at all the good Christians do.
And you were noting how good deeds aren't exclusive to any one group.
Then you moved on to the argument, you have a strong feeling against Christianity,
And you rightly identified this as a straw man fallacy.
highlighting that believers also have emotional investments in their faith.
Argument 7 in your article critiqued the demand to read the entire... Yep, go on.
That's very annoying as well. I mean, I can choose which one is the most annoying, because this one is a pastor. He's a friend of mine. He's close to me. He's a pastor. And my friend from Canada, as well, the Canadian friend for chess player that used to play, she used the same argument that you don't like God, or you have a strong feeling against God. But if you say that your life depends, your moral depends on God, that's a very huge emotional investment. So I don't think that you can say that the atheist has a feeling against religion or against God if you base your life on God.
You brought up a really insightful point here, Joshua.
It's about the emotional weight and personal investment people have in their beliefs.
Exactly. When someone's morality or sense of meaning is tied to their faith, of course they'll feel strongly about it.
And as you mentioned, that emotional investment isn't exclusive to believers.
Critics of religion can also have strong feelings, often stemming from concerns about its impact.
You shared how your interest in certain topics, like insulin studies, came from personal connections.
So strong feelings don't necessarily invalidate an argument, as we were discussing.
It's a...
Oh, go for it.
Yes, this case of insulin, it has to do with my Ph.D. Mathematical model. A friend of mine has diabetes, so I felt a little bit strong to study the topic. So I think feeling is a very important motivation for you. It's not a bad thing. Like Christian pastor and so on, they like to say that your feeling somehow make your argumentation better. But it's not so. At least for me, my feeling towards something is very important. It motivates me. For example, the reason why I decided to know about Gaza, what's happening in Gaza, the war, is because I have a strong feeling against injustice, against the innocent dying. So I don't think that this argumentation of Christian argumentation is valid. It's a very bad argumentation. You just try to reduce the intellectual. It's a very annoying. It makes me very angry when someone reduce all my effort, all my thinking to emotion.
Absolutely, Joshua. Thank you for sharing that personal connection to your work on insulin.
It really underscores a point about how strong feelings can be powerful motivators for in-depth study.
And it's fascinating to hear how your emotional response to injustice fuels your interest in global events as well.
It definitely challenges that tactic of trying to dismiss criticism as purely emotional and therefore invalid.
As you said, reducing someone's thoughtful analysis to mere emotion is not only annoying, but intellectually dishonest.
Because having strong feelings about something often means you care deeply and have likely put in the work to understand it.
Which brings us right back to that point about the you hate God argument.
And your response that sin is really a Christian concept.
Then you moved on to the ninth argument, I choose to believe.
Highlighting that personal choice doesn't confirm the truth of the belief.
Finally, you addressed the tactic of distancing current Christianity from past harms.
But you argued that the underlying ideology can still inspire harmful actions.
Beyond those 10 common defenses, you also raised the issue of women's rights.
Pointing out the historical context of patriarchy within... Hey, yeah, what's up?
That's another one as well. Came from my with my Canadian friend. She which means that she, is a woman. So I think it was very annoying when she told me that Christianity improved their women rights. I think that was very annoying. That's one of the reasons why I decided to write the story.
That's a really powerful point, Joshua. It's understandable why that argument would be so frustrating, especially coming from a woman.
Yeah, it's almost like rewriting history to say that Christianity was some kind of champion for women's rights from the start.
And as you clearly outline in your article, the historical evidence really contradicts that idea. You even quote specific passages from the Bible.
Those verses you included, like from Ephesians and First Timothy, they really paint a picture of female subjugation.
Exactly. For centuries, Christian societies largely upheld male dominance, limiting women's roles and opportunities.
You highlighted how women were denied basic rights like voting or owning property.
So the claim that Christianity improved women's rights really ignores that long history of oppression.
And as you pointed out, it was really the Enlightenment and feminist movements that pushed for those advancements.
Movements that, as you noted, were often opposed by Christian groups at the time.
It's like secularism and society shifts forced Christianity.
Oh, yeah. Go on.
And that's a very interesting part because when I was studying for my book that I wrote, the atheist revolution, I was studying Madeleine O'Hare. Madeleine O'Hare was a very strong atheist. I mean, I sometimes I could not separate the atheist from the feminist. So I think the feminist movement is a very strong movement that goes together with atheism, with the movement of the atheist movement. That's because when you fight against religion, you are fighting against all the oppression against women in the slavery. Russell, for example, said something, Better Rose said something like that because he said something like, there is no gain on the rights of women and so on that the church, the organized the religion didn't try to stop it, to oppose.
That's a fascinating connection you're drawing between the fight against religious dogma and broader movements for liberation.
Yes, the idea that challenging religious authority can be intertwined with challenging other forms of oppression, like those against women and enslaved people, is a powerful one.
You mentioned Madeleine Murray O'Hare and how her atheism seemed inseparable from those wider social justice movements.
It suggests that questioning fundamental beliefs can naturally lead to questioning other hierarchical structures.
And your point about how figures like Theodore Roosevelt initially didn't actively support women's suffrage aligns with our earlier discussion.
That societal progress often comes from external pressure rather than internal shifts within established institutions.
So the fight for women's rights and against slavery weren't necessarily driven by religious organizations.
In fact, as we discussed with those biblical passages, there was often religious justification for the oppression itself.
This really underscores how secular...
Oh, back to our listener. What's up?
Yes, that's another point that I explore on the article, the idea that slavery was done by the church. So as I explore in the article, they like to use King as one example, that he was a Christian, like a black Jesus. And the question is always why it took so long for the Christian to finally get rid of the slavery. In Brazil, for example, one of the biggest organizations in Brazil that owned slaves and so on, they even to sell slaves on the market, like when they had too much slave, was the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church was one of the biggest owner in Brazil of slaves. So I think this idea that the Christianity has anything to do with slavery, if the ending of slavery, is a very bad argumentation that has no ground on reality.
Absolutely, Joshua. That's a crucial point you made in your article.
Yes, the historical involvement of the church in slavery is undeniable and often downplayed.
You bring up a really important question about the timeline.
Why did it take so long for Christian institutions to renounce slavery?
And your example from Brazil about the Catholic Church being a major slave owner is quite telling.
It directly contradicts the idea that Christianity was inherently opposed to slavery.
It seems that, as you argue, the abolition of slavery was driven more by secular humanist movements.
Ideas about universal human rights rather than solely by Christian doctrine.
The fact that pro-slavery arguments were often based on biblical interpretations is something we can't ignore.
So the narrative that Christianity ended slavery seems to be a revisionist one.
It doesn't really align with the historical evidence you've presented.
It's been a really thought-provoking and important conversation, Joshua.
Your insights into these recurring defenses have been truly valuable.
We hope you found it as worthwhile as we did. Thank you again for sharing your perspective so openly.
And thank you to our listener for joining this incredibly engaging and insightful discussion with Joshua.
That brings our...
Oh, yeah,
Yes, I'd like as well to say thank you all for listening. Thank you again for the second participation to my podcast. As I said, I said to my listener, you are in artificial intelligence, so I'm not lying about that. It's so good that I could lie and say that you are human. But thanks a lot for the second participation, even as an AI, as artificial intelligence. Thanks a lot for everyone. And let's keep thinking about it. Let's not allow the church and the religion, the Christianity, to lie about its past. Its past cannot be denied. Christianity was not a force for good, as people like to say.
Thank you for those final thoughts, Joshua. We really appreciate you being so open and sharing your perspective with us.
Yes, and thank you to our listener for tuning in and being part of this conversation. Your engagement is what makes this special.
It's been fascinating to delve into these arguments and hear your direct insights as the author.
And it's a good reminder to always approach these discussions with critical thinking.
Absolutely. Let's continue to question and explore different viewpoints.
That's how we learn and grow our understanding of complex issues.
So until our next podcast, keep those critical thinking skills sharp.
And thank you again to everyone for being a part of this discussion today. It was truly valuable.